You're live. Hey,
Hey,
welcome.
hey.
We are here.
Wow.
Welcome to Design Unfiltered. This is going to be recorded. We're going to pop this up later, but as always, we're here live right now. So hopefully, some people will be streaming in, tuning in, dropping out, joining us. Um, yeah. How is everyone? You guys well?
Good.
Doing
Good.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's finally like kind of sunny today. It's been such a weird June over here on the East Coast. It's been so rainy and dank. And so it's actually like, oh, a little
Yeah.
bit.
I need a bit of it. I'm solar powered, so I need the sunshine. Well, as always, while we're waiting for some people to stream in and join us, we always love to know where people are calling in from. um, so, so drop it in the comments. Introduce yourself. Feel free. Share where you're based. A lot of people in the comments connect with each other, or either know each other already or connect later. So it's a really great spot to do a bit of networking as well and get to know some fellow designers, fellow creatives. But yeah,
I know. I love it when I see people's names come up again and again. It's like Ryan Klein. It's like he's always, maybe this will be the one time he's not here. But it's like, I feel like when people come regularly and it's like, oh, you start to recognize their names and you're like, oh, yeah, I know that person. I know that person. So it's friendly. It's nice.
Love to see that. Super helpful. And I've noticed too, a lot of people seem to view these episodes post when they've aired as well. So I'm just happy that we can make them, put them together, talk about things, and still share it later, and people can go back and watch, learn, have takeaways from it even after the event as well.
Hey, Ryan Klein.
Ryan Klein.
There he is.
Good to see you, Ryan.
Yeah. Hi, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
Love it.
Excellent. Well, any other things that you guys? Oh, hi Sam. That you want to kick things off with before we kind of get into everything? Any other? I know you guys like to sometimes quiz our audience a little bit, or
I have a question.
Okay.
Like, is there a project that people are working on that they're excited about? Or it doesn't have to be a project, but maybe just something that's happening in your life, something good. What good stuff is happening in your life? What are you working on?
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, how about while that's going on, and I would love to hear from everyone in our panel here about their project too. In the interim, I really want to introduce our amazing guest that's joined us this morning. Janine, thank you for joining us. You're in New York City.
Happy to be here. Yes, I'm joining live from Brooklyn.
Live from Brooklyn. Amazing. And that is actually where we first met for coffee many moons ago.
Right down the street.
It was.
About 5 blocks down the street.
I love that. I reached out to you and wanted to meet you at that time, and then obviously wanted to keep in touch, and I'm so grateful that you're able to join us today because you have a deep background in working with talent, specifically with creative and design talent.
Yep.
You've worked in creative agencies and spent some of your earlier career in those spaces, but you also spent more of your later career, the last few years, in-house at some really interesting companies, Meta, Levis, DuoLingo, I think all pretty reputable companies. Most people might have heard a thing or two about. And I would say all companies that are definitely known in one way or another for design.
Yeah.
And yourself as a talent leader, internally at those companies, part of your role is to find, vet, communicate, attract, hire great designers. So I'm eager to hear more about that, but hopefully that is a great opportunity for anyone that's tuning in to have questions for you or to understand more about what goes on the inside. I know in many cases people think it's a bit of a black hole when they apply to a job or what happens, but you can peel back that curtain in many ways for us today, I think, and share a bit more about that. And I think for any designer, knowledge is power when it comes to the application process and navigating, finding the role or anything like that. So the more that you know, the more you can tailor and tweak and everything like that. So,
especially now in this market, I think there hasn't been, I don't know if there's been another market where you've had to be more prepared and more informed going into your job search than right now.
That's a really, really great point. Well, on that, did you guys want to share anything that you're working on, any of your projects? Coming back to your question, Joanne, what are you working on right now that you're excited about?
Oh, well, you know me. I'm a broken record, but it will stop after Friday the 20th. I'm working on my George Michael show, which I'm going to do next Friday in the city. And we just pinned down a really fun surprise for the encore. So I'm not gonna blow the surprise and say now, but I'm really excited about it. And this is the first time I've ever sung with the backup singer. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Clicks in the background too.
Little snaps. Yeah.
Yes. Snaps. Yeah. All right.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Little harmonies.
How about yourself, Erica? What are you excited about working on, chipping away at?
I mean, honestly, we're doing an in-person event in a couple of weeks in July, and I'm moderating it, so I'm panicking a little bit, but I am working really hard behind the scenes on, like, we have some amazing panelists and questions and all of the logistics there. So that's kind of where my head is right now.
And you're going to be great, Erica. You're like such a great hostess with the mostest, and you're so great at building community. It's going to be so fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stoked. Yeah. Janine, anything on your side? What are you chipping away at?
Yeah, mine is kind of work related. I just wrapped up a big project with actually this company called Yazio. They are a health tech company. They're based in Berlin. And we have spent the last, I want to say 9 months or so, basically redesigning their end-to-end hiring process. And I'm talking, not just putting together interview frameworks, like we're talking building core competencies, like, getting everybody trained, it's been a lot of very kind of deep strategic work that I've been doing with the team, which is amazing. So shout out to Yazio and anybody that may be joining from there today. We just launched it. And so I'm excited to kind of see what the feedback looks like and just kind of work towards optimizing and helping them, hopefully double in size in the next year. So
it's amazing. I love to hear that. Obviously having a great hiring process is going to be key to all of that as well. Very curious to hear a bit more about that. Well, for myself, side projects wise, or anything that's driving me, I'm actually going out on a trip tomorrow. I leave for 10 days, so very excited about taking a little summer holiday of sorts. But other than that, it's been a mad rush of the usual work that I do with recruitment. But as you can see, I have a few drums around me too. I've been a drummer for a long time, but I actually run a whole drum company and drum business in Australia as well. So there's been a mad rush to get a lot of that stuff sorted in the last couple of days as well. A lot of drums heading to Australia, got boxes heading down there, and all sorts of things going on. So I'm always splitting my time between designing, recruiting, and drums.
It's amazing. I feel like you're always full of surprises, Jared.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Jared, are you still
it's like
playing?
the perfect. Oh, sorry. What?
Oh, are you playing like in a band now? Or?
Yeah, I play in a band. I just recorded an album the other week too, which was pretty fun.
Casual.
Cool.
I love that.
Nice.
In Greenpoint, in Brooklyn. First time I've recorded in Brooklyn, so it was a good experience too.
Amazing. I was going to say drums is such a great side gig to have, because I always wanted to play drums when I was little, but I was like, oh no, it's not feminine enough, which was so stupid. I really wish I had done it. It's so dumb. But it seems like the best place is to get out your aggressions, or just to be physical, kind of gets you out of your head and your day job a bit, and just gets you into a different frame.
Yeah, it can be. And that's, to be honest, sometimes that's a test that I use of if I'm getting too bogged down by the work, even when I'm playing, I'm still thinking about work. And it's like, I got to do something about that. I either need to get better at managing the work or write more challenging drum parts that I need to think about them more. Right. At the same time, that's
Yeah.
It's too easy. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's me. Drummond, count to 4. That's all. That's all I need to know.
Nice.
See so many names popping up here too. This is awesome. Chris,
Yeah.
yay.
Seeing some
Sasha,
friends out there. Hi, guys.
Yeah.
excellent. Sam, also in upstate New York. Both Joanne and I upstate New York too. So thank you.
Chris Novak. Hey, Chris. Nice to see you again.
Love all this.
Oh, Pierre, he was sharing his project, a trans joy documentary. Awesome.
Very
amazing. I would love to hear more about that. If you want to put some details in the chat, if you have any sort of like marketing materials or anything ready to go yet, please share. That sounds awesome.
Excellent. That's in New Yorkers today too. I love that. Bit of local flavor.
Jennifer Nappy in Denver. Hey, Jennifer. Monica. Oh yeah, fellow Brooklynite.
Yeah.
Lots of good people here today.
I know.
Thank you as always. Hey, Dave.
Hey.
Also
fellow musician, tech person as well.
Yeah. Love that.
Jonathan. Great.
What is that
flag?
flag?
Is that?
Yeah. Does anyone know? I don't know.
That's a cool flag. I want to visit there, wherever it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's in.
Amazing.
Where are you from?
Leslie Hampton, San Francisco. Woo woo. Nice.
We got a couple San Francisco. I see Chris, Andrews, Sasha. I don't know where you're joining from. I feel like you're always in some part of the world.
Oh, Sasha.
Nice. Hey, Chris.
Well, I'd love to know, Janine, if you could sum it up, which I'm sure you could elaborate a lot. But this last 9 months, thinking about hiring and talent and helping this particular company grow, what do you think are a couple of the key ingredients to making a really great process that allows a company to hire great people? What are some key things that have to be built in? And if there were a few things that maybe where companies get it wrong a little bit, but what have you tried to really optimize for in this build out of a process?
Yeah, I think two things really stick out: alignment and calibration. I think you have to know what you want, and your whole team has to be aligned, right? You have to understand what is this person going to be doing at this company? You know, what are the desired outcomes of this role? You know, what is the growth trajectory like for this person as they're coming in? You know, you really have to put a lot of intention behind how you build the profile for the candidate that you want to go after, right? And so I think once you're fully aligned, then it's really about getting everybody calibrated, making sure that everybody understands how to evaluate that talent. And I think that's where, you know, you build those core competencies into the process. That's where, you know, you're talking about rubrics, right? You know, what are the questions you're going to be asking people? Like, what do good answers look like? And making sure that everybody on the team understands that and that they're properly trained to go in and conduct those interviews. I think, you know, where a lot of companies really fall behind is when they don't have properly trained interviewers and they don't have enough strategy behind the recruitment. They're just like, we got to fill seats. You know, they're not really aligning their design hiring with their eng hiring and their product hiring, right? Like, they're not thinking about how all of these roles work together and how everybody's going to be collaborating towards the same goals, right? Like, they're not taking that strategic view. They're just kind of hiring blindly. And I think when you rush to hire like that and you don't have the right strategy, then you're going to be doing layoffs in a year. And so I think it's really important for companies to, and I'll shout out the thing I've taken the most, I think, from my time at DuoLingo, but you got to take the long view, right? Like, you've got to take the long view in everything, but especially in hiring, because that's how you hire with intention. That's how you hire with purpose. And that's how you build a company of employees that will grow with you. And will actually, you know, help move your business forward. and help enhance your product. And so I really do think it's alignment and calibration. If you falter there, you're going to have a terrible process.
Gonna have a hard time. I spoke to a designer just earlier today, and they were asking me a lot about the market and you know the typical kind of questions that you know a lot of designers want to ask a recruiter. But one of the comments that they made was like, "Oh, so are companies actually hiring people, or are they just kind of interviewing a lot of designers and not getting anywhere?" And I thought, "Oh, wow, interesting observation that." Because yes, companies are hiring people, but yes, I could see how you'd arrive at like there's a lot of interviewing going on and a lot of like having to go, but not a lot of getting to that finish line. And maybe that's that lack of calibration, alignment, strategy, skilled interview. It's not really coming together, and hires are not happening for some of those companies, and they're still looking 6 months later. It's very tough for a designer to be thrust into that. And you know, there's a lot of things outside of your control. That's challenging.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the other thing too. Let's say a company has a product designer role posted. It could be evergreen. It could be a role they just keep up, and so they're just maybe they're constantly interviewing. They're building a pipeline. I always like to make that clear if I'm at a company and we put up an evergreen rec, like, hey, this is like, this is what this is, and if you're recruiting and you're talking to them, make it clear. Not everybody does that, but that could be it. I also just think a lot of people have like decision paralysis right now. It's kind of like, it's the difference between walking into a store and it's like this small independent shop and you've got maybe like, a few racks of clothing to go through, right? You're going to make a decision a lot more quickly than if you walk into a huge department store and you have 3 floors worth of clothing to look at, right? Yeah. And so I think it's this notion of, we really want to make sure we're doing our due diligence with this highly saturated market. And, candidates are just getting a lot better, and work in general is getting a lot better, right? Like, I think there are so many more startups now. There are so many more brands now. And so I think it's, there are multiple reasons, right, why a process could take a lot longer. But companies are hiring, there are decisions being made. People are getting jobs. And it's just, it's a wild market.
It feels topsy-turvy. For sure.
Well, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, because you worked at these great places, DuoLingo, Meta and Levi's and all these great places. I think people are really curious, like, how does one break into a place like that? Like, so many designers say DuoLingo is like this kind of Shangri-La, right? So I know this is a very long question, but do you have any, like, maybe tips as far as like, what do people generally kind of get wrong, or like, what's a wrong assumption that candidates have? And then what are some tips you could give them for like, what does DuoLingo, for instance, like really look for? What do you look for?
Wow, I don't know how much time we have here, but I could talk about this for hours. So I think what a lot of people get wrong is really it's the portfolio. Like, your portfolio is what is going to get you noticed. And then if you want to take that one step deeper, it's you have to think about what's going to get you noticed, and then what's going to get you further along in your interviews, right?
Yeah.
Like, when I look at a portfolio, I don't want to see a bunch of text on the page. I don't want to see a bunch of wireframes. Like, I don't want to see like, 2 slides of context before I see the output, before I actually see what you made. I want to just see what you made. So I think what a lot of people get tripped up on is they almost give you too much to look at in the portfolio, instead of just show me what you made, kind of like go backwards, start from the end. And then, like in your portfolio, like, I want to see prototypes. I want to see your final product. Right. And then that's going to be the thing that gets the recruiter to respond and to book that call. And then when you're on that call with the recruiter, that's where you can provide a little bit more context. You could talk a little bit more about the strategy behind, what you made, right? And then, when it comes time to actually present your work to the hiring manager, or if you're doing like a panel presentation, right? That's when you pull the case studies out. And then that's when you can dive deep into the work. Don't create a portfolio that feels like a case study, because that's just going to be, it's just too much, and people don't have the time. I mean, it'll under 10 seconds. Like that's what we're looking at in your portfolio. If I pull up your homepage and it doesn't load on my phone properly, that's a problem. Like, think about all those details, be really thoughtful. Use your design thinking in how you present yourself. So I think, there's a lot of things you can do with your portfolio, right? Like, pay attention to white space, pay attention to your fonts, pay attention to consistency, pay attention to aesthetic, right? Like, your portfolio, yes, it's full of work you've done for other brands, but this is also a representation of who you are as a designer, right? And if you're able to somehow portray that in your portfolio, that's going to be great. That's going to resonate. That's going to be something people remember, and it's going to help you kind of stand out from the sea of thousands of portfolios that we're looking at, like, show me something I haven't seen before. I don't know, kind of brand it, like, right? Like, brand your portfolio. And the other thing too, and I'm just kind of like firing things off. So if you guys want to jump in, feel free. But, the other thing too, and I do this a lot, I do portfolio reviews for a lot of people that reach out to me, and a lot of people I've worked with previously and stuff. But, there's this tendency to put too much work in your portfolio. And you don't, people just will lead with like their most recent work, but if that's not your strongest work, just don't even put it in, And if you have 4 amazing projects, like, we don't need to have student work in there. Like, if you have, and we don't need to have like 4 more projects that were, maybe not amazing, right? So it's just kind of like, you got to think about that, and make sure that when we pop it open, we're going to see 1 or 2 really great things right away, right? Because you want people to kind of like click into it further and spend more time. So if you have my attention for more than 10 seconds, like, you're probably going to get booked for a first chat so that we can talk a little bit more about it. I think another misconception for people is, like, if they haven't worked at like a big tech company, they're never going to get, hired anywhere else. I mean, at DuoLingo, when we were recruiting there, I mean, it was never really about that. It was just 100%, let me look at this, let me look at their portfolio, let me see the work that they've done. And I think because you can get so many great ideas from so many different places, and, you don't necessarily want someone that's spent, 10 years at another company. It wouldn't make them look any better than someone that's like spent time at like small startups.
Sure.
I think you just have to have the work, right? You have to have the work to back it up.
The undeniable.
Yeah. You just have, it could be an app that like you've never even heard of, but if you're able to show what you've done, and we're able to see your craft, like craft, I know everyone's been talking about craft, especially this year. Craft has been a big, big word, but it's got to look good, right? Like, your portfolio has to look good.
Shouldn't look bad. That's for sure.
Well, it's the portfolio piece itself, right? Like, the portfolio is a piece of the portfolio. It's very meta, but yes.
Yeah. And so I think that's a big misconception too. And I think if you're at a smaller company, if you're at, a startup, and you're kind of nervous that you don't have like big brands in your portfolio, don't be nervous about that. Just make the work that you do have, make it look really great in that portfolio. Lead with the work. I always tell that to people, like, you have to lead with the work. We'll get to know who you are later down the line, but until we start talking to you, you have to lead with the work. And I think that's a huge thing. If anyone, if you take that away and that's all you take away from this, then like, great. And then
I
Go ahead.
wanted to ask you a specific question about that before we move on.
Sure.
What I was really getting from your description of what you're looking for in portfolios, like the headline that I was getting was like, edit yourself, right? Like don't have too much work, lead with your best work. Don't have a ton of text on each page. Like don't give me the full case study. So just in terms of, what you do like to see in portfolios, are we talking about like just finished screens? Do you want like a little bit of narration? Like, should there be some text? What kind of description are you looking for?
I mean, I don't know, I've been doing this for like 15 years. So I feel like if I look at a portfolio and I just see screens, that's enough for me. If you want to have a little bit of balance, maybe just what was the challenge, what was the problem you solved? And then show us how you solved it. It's more about showing than telling. And I think the thing is, this is your hook. Your portfolio is your hook, right? Like this is what you're going to use to get people interested in you. And once they're interested in you because they see the work, that's when you can really like give them the context and explain everything else. I think, if you have to have some identifiers, like if you're just like, I can't do this without text, just try to be really simple. Can you describe what this is in a sentence, right? Like think about just brevity and being really concise, because while we're evaluating portfolios and we're seeing your ability to edit yourself, that is also, we're also judging then your ability to edit the work that you're doing at the company, right? Everything is a reflection of how you're going to be as a designer at this company. And so, if I'm seeing that you can't make the hard decision to take out some of your older work that maybe, you love, but like isn't very relevant, to the role you're applying for or to the industry anymore. Right. That tells me that, well, maybe, you're going to have an issue, being able to edit and be concise here. And maybe that's, going to be a problem in terms of, just like execution and collaboration, right? These are all the things we think about. And these are all the things I wish candidates would think about as they were preparing themselves for the interview process.
I think the reality is some of it is, I know people, screens showing final output, beautiful polished work, context, case study format. I think the reality is the text is probably not going to tip the scales. If the final output and what's being presented visually and how it's laid out, if it's not of a certain bar, then the text is not going to get you over the hump. If the final output is there and it looks great and it hits the bar, that's probably a yes. We're probably likely to stick around and look at a bit more, or hopefully tip the scales all the way to we want to have a call with this person. If it's great output and some text, it's still great output. It still looks good. The text is a bit extra, okay, but it still probably tips the scales. But if it's just the text and you're trying to get over that threshold with that, it's probably where it falls down. You can have great text and, as Ryan said, great metrics and things like that. But if the output and the bar of the quality is still not there that's needed for the company, then the metrics aren't necessarily going to matter because it's just, you're not getting the craft signal.
Yeah, and metrics do matter. We want to see that. I think, back in the day, you could be a UX designer and you could just be doing wireframes and that could just be your job. And now we have product designers. They are UX, they are UI, they are doing all of it. They are, they are part of the business of building the product. And I think one of the things that a lot of product designers maybe miss or don't understand is that, and I'm just speaking for myself and for companies that I've recruited for, we want to see that you understand what pushes revenue, what drives growth, what increases your daily active users. Do you understand the business behind the work that you're doing and how your work affects that? And so there's this push towards finding people that have a really high bar for craft and visual design, but but also understand the business, and they understand how to work collaboratively with their stakeholders, and with Eng and with product, and how to actually build a product that drives that growth. And when we see that, like when I talk to a candidate and they're able to connect their output to the metrics, and show me the results of what did this do, did this drive user growth, like by how much, that's a candidate that I'm going to move forward.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to highlight something here real quick, just on that point. Just Clarissa mentioned it. How do recruiters react to work that's never been launched? It was more of a pitch, but is visually high-level work. I think it's a great signal. Some of my favorite sections on a designer's portfolio is what they might call play or deleted, or bedroom bangers, I called it the other day. Like, I love seeing that stuff. I think it's super. In fact, I have someone moving to like a 3rd round interview at a pretty top company right now, and what got them in that room was this section on their site that was like, this was client work that ultimately they didn't go with, or we pitched, we only made it to a certain stage, it then didn't go further. It's a bit outside of your control, but it looks awesome. It was killer work, and it gave the signal like, wow, that designer does that, like we want to speak to them. So great work is great work sometimes for that signal.
Yeah, I mean, I say show it. If the work is good and you're proud, and you've got you've got usable prototypes, and we can kind of play with it a little bit and see what you build. I think anything that shows us how you approach design, what is your thinking behind the work that you do? What's the why, right? Like why did you make decisions? Why did you make these interaction decisions, right? Like why didn't it go through, right? Like what happened? Did the company maybe not get their Series B funding, and so you had to pull back? I don't know. There are a multitude of reasons, right? Like why you would work for a long time. I mean, this would happen at Meta with the team that I was working with. Like sometimes they'd be working for months on something, and then all of a sudden something else was happening with the company, and then they had to shift gears and focus on something else. And, that left a lot of great work, unshipped. And so, they just kind of had to sit on that, but that was great work. And so, if you can still speak to it, right, and you can still show us why you did what you did, what was the problem you were solving, we can still tell how you solved that problem. And I think that will give us the cues that we need to understand, will you be able to be successful here at this company?
It's a great starting point.
Yeah. Does this, like, how do you feel, I guess, about, does everyone's portfolio need to be a website, or can it be a PDF or a Figma? Because, it could go both ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think you want to make it accessible, right? Like, sure, you can have a Figma portfolio, and sure, my hiring manager, who's, probably, a design manager, they're going to be able to, quickly go through it. But, maybe I'm not in Figma every day. Maybe I don't know my way around it, right? Like maybe the recruiter maybe it's a sourcer, right? Who is even further removed from something like Figma. I think, I know that, people have been trying to find really interesting ways to put your portfolio together. I think go with the basics, and just focus more on the work that you're putting in there. One of the biggest things that is a red flag to me is when you have a site that's not mobile friendly, because more than half of us are probably going through portfolios on our phones. So I would say have a site, have a website, have it be mobile friendly. If you can't have a website for whatever reason, I also recognize that websites cost money, and sometimes you just can't have that access. Go ahead and put it in a PDF. But if it's in a PDF, recognize it just might not work the way you want it to work, right? Like if you've got a bunch of prototypes in there, like are they clickable? Is it gonna is it going to, be the kind of thing that like really captivates you visually? Like you have to think about that stuff. And I think, it is important if you're going to pick something to invest in for the search, like invest in a good site, build a good site, make it work on mobile. And that should be, that should be plenty.
Yeah. I often feel like if people send me a presentation style, if they send me like a PDF, and just to be clear on the Figma side, there's kind of two different formats you can get with Figma. There's like that kind of zoom in, zoom out thing that you were talking about. And that drives me crazy too. Like I really don't like to look at stuff that way, but there's also the presentation mode, which is like actually like, you can click through the slides kind of like a keynote. But I feel like PDFs and the Figma presentation, I feel like there's pros and cons to them. Right. Like I feel like with the PDFs and the Figmas, you can change them. So you can actually change the order of them for different clients you might be interviewing for. So if you want to show your e-commerce work first for an e-commerce company, super easy to just like zhuzh it, or put your enterprise B2B stuff up first if that's the kind of job that you're going for. But the downside is that, in a website, you can just kind of click on whatever project you want. Like you have more control as the user, like the hiring manager, the recruiter. So you can kind of choose your own adventure as opposed to like having to go through a certain sequence to see all the work, right? So there's pros and cons.
Yeah. I mean, and that just like brings me to another don't make me go through 5 clicks to like get to the project I want and then find my way back to the home screen. And that matters, right? Like we just don't have a ton of time to spend. And so it's like, you just want to make it as user friendly as possible. And you just want to think, is this person going to be able to, is this the best way to present my work, right? Like you kind of have to put yourself, you have to use that empathy, right? That you use as a designer. You have to think about it in, if a normal person is just, if my sister or like my brother or whatever is like looking at my portfolio, right? Like, can they find their way around?
Yeah. So I want to take this just in terms of like the timeline of the recruitment process. We've talked about like how to get in, like how to get noticed, how to get that first round interview. What kinds of skills, like how does it shift? Like as the candidate goes through the interview process, now what kinds of things are you looking for? Because now you have a good sense of their craft and the way they put things together. But what kinds of signals can people be giving you that you're like, oh, this is somebody who's going to work really well here?
I think, it's the work that gets you in the door, right? And it's the way you work that gets you through the process. And I think that is key. You really at some point are in a way kind of, you're selling yourself, right, to this team. This is a team, they all work together. They're very collaborative and they want to make sure that, you're going to be able to collaborate at their level. They're going to want to get a sense of who you are. How do you approach the work? And so I think that's really the distinction there is it's more about how you work and the way that you work and your approach to work that gets you those further interviews.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
I think you had said like we had a little powwow together, the 4 of us on Monday, and you said something about how you're looking through the lens of like, can this person collaborate with our team, but can they also like talk to our founders? Like, can they present their work one day, right? Like, I said that.
Yeah. And I also think, that's when you start thinking about things like confidence. That is something that people talk about, right? Like I've had many conversations with hiring managers where there's been a design candidate and they have an amazing portfolio, but they are just like, they cannot present themselves, right? They don't have presence. They don't have, the ability to talk about their designs, advocate for the work in an influential and collaborative way. And I think that's a big deal, especially now with all of these brands, having very lean teams, right? You have to be able to do that. And, at DuoLingo, I think a lot of designers were probably, especially early career designers, were and probably still are very intimidated by this. But we used to take product review, and I think I saw Meg on here. I think we still do take product review very seriously at DuoLingo. But this was. You would be, a level 1 or level 2, like entry level designer, and you would have to be in a room, with Luis Fanon, the founder, and you'd have to be presenting your work. And so that was something, we would look at in the interview process, right? Like, can this person be in product review? Can this person, handle being in rooms daily with executive stakeholders? And is that something, that they can bring to the table? Because there are a lot of companies where, we can teach that. And of course, you're going to continue to learn, right? Like, you're not going to just show up at DuoLingo and, you make a mistake, your first product review and you're cut. It doesn't work that way. But, you have to be able to represent your work. And you have to be able to do that with a little bit of authority. And I think the way that comes across in the interview process is, are you confident? Are you well-spoken? Do you talk about your work with brevity? Do you understand your work? Like, you just have to be, prepared in that way.
Did you notice that difference sometimes in designers coming in for maybe that portfolio presentation round or something where they are articulating their work, and you could maybe see the difference between someone that was a little more rehearsed, if you will, or knew the work better and could just naturally speak about it, versus someone that wasn't very confident, was just reading the whole time? Or what are like some telltale signs that you look for that's good and not so good when it comes to that?
Look, designers are, they're storytellers, right? Designers are. I love designers. I'm marrying one. They are storytellers. They are the bridge between edge and product. They're the bridge between the brand and the user, right? It's on them to really make sure that people enjoy interacting with your product and your brand, right? And so I think, as a designer, if you can't bring a little bit of that to the interview, like if you can't captivate me just a little bit with a story, if you can't, tell me how you got from point A to point C, in a way that isn't you reading off of a page and like looking to the side. And, I just think you have to have a little bit of that charisma. You have to bring a little bit of that storytelling to the process, because you're then going to have to do it at the company. So we want to see that you can do it in the interview. And that takes practice, especially if you're in your early career, if you're trying to like pivot, from one industry to another, you just have to practice. Like, you've got to get the reps in. And you've got to practice your story, do it in the mirror, do it with ChatGPT, do it with your friends. But you have to nail that story. And maybe you'll sound rehearsed, but I'd rather have a candidate that sounded a little rehearsed than a candidate that was like reading, from a teleprompter.
Mm-hmm. I think also too, we were talking about this on Monday as well, where a lot of designers and, people outside of design too can tend to be introverted, right? So maybe they don't feel like, oh, I'm this person who's going to come and be the shining star on the stage. I personally, I did a sales call with 2 vendors last week, and one was all razzmatazz personality. And then the other one was actually kind of monotone, but really knew his stuff. And it was so organized and it was so custom tailored to us that I was just like, I trust you. Like, I get it. Like, he was talking about his process and like showed us how the sausage was made. And I just really responded well to that. And I just kind of, I think it helped me in my own sales process, where I'm like, oh, I don't actually have to be in like a great mood and feel on to be successful. Like, if I have like a story and a process, like I can bring that. I don't have to be this like, amazing diva or whatever. Right.
I think there's a distinction, right, between personality and confidently presenting your work, right? Like, I think Well, it's all about the substance. Like, you know, we're not judging you based on your personality, right? Like, we're judging you based on, can you communicate effectively? Like, that's really the bottom line, is, can you communicate effectively? And especially when you're at a company, you know, like Meta or like DuoLingo, and, you know, they're scaling fast, they're growing fast, they're working fast, they're moving fast, right? You know, we have to get a sense of, how do you communicate? Do you understand what the important pieces are that you need to relay to us? You know, it's such a huge thing right now, effective communication, and it's just important to have. And I think this is what I see. You know, I see this a lot with the more tenured, like more seasoned senior level folks, that maybe kind of started off in a world where they didn't really have to talk a lot, and they could kind of be, you know, a designer focusing on the art in the corner. And I think, you know, that's just not how it works these days. You know, as a product designer, you know, you have to do a little bit more than just the work. You know, you have to be able to collaborate. You have to be influential. You have to be able to build trust, and you have to, you know, have an authoritative kind of voice. Like, you have to show that ownership over your work. And I think a lot of that comes from how effectively you communicate.
Nice.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like we talked a lot about like how challenging it is to get through some of this, but you must have a lot of success stories from you know, even your recent time at DuoLingo, of designers going through these, jumping through these hoops, getting these roles. I saw in the comments earlier, both Mig and Chris over at Notion talking about hires that came from non-shiny companies as well, like non-big names, like a lot of success stories at DuoLingo. You know, they obviously hired a lot at the time while you were there as well. So a lot of designers make it through. It's not all, you know, reasons why you won't make it through. There's a lot that you know, do end up with job offers, and, you know, are still probably doing well in the team now.
And I would say the ones that get hired, they're the ones that do the research, right? Like, they do the research, they spend the time, make the investment to understand your brand, and not just understand your brand, look up all of the people in that company, like, look up the people in the company, right? You know, talking about portfolios and how to build your portfolio. This is like one of my favorite pieces of advice I give to designers, but this is also how I train and calibrate my recruiting teams. Like, a lot of recruiters don't know how to look at portfolios, and they don't understand, you know, how to vet that kind of talent. And one of the very first things I always have them do is go through the design team, pull up all their portfolios, look at the portfolios of the people that are hired and working at that company. You know, if the chief officers, the chief design officers, the heads of design, like, if they, you know, sometimes they don't have a portfolio online, but if they do, absolutely 100% go look at their work. You know, look at the work from the designers from, you know, competing companies, get a really good sense of who these people are. Read the blogs, right? Like, go beyond just the careers page on the site, you know, and understand, just understand what is important to the company. So, you know, for example, you know, and I'll just bring up a Levi's example, because it's like really easy, but we would see tons of amazing designers. And at Levi's, I hired all design, but including apparel design. And if you think about Levi's, right, it's like they're like all about denim. And we've had amazing portfolios of designers, fashion designers there, that just the team couldn't visualize their aesthetic working with the brand's aesthetic. And I think a lot of people don't think about that going into the interview process. But if we can't visualize you like working on this brand or with this team, it's going to just make it a little bit harder, right? Like, you just have to think about all the things that we're considering in terms of how we evaluate candidates. And the ones that are making it are, they have the craft, you know, they have high craft, they have high strategy, they are able to communicate effectively, They understand the work, they understand the brand, right? And it's almost like these candidates are just like showing us what we want to see, right? They're telling us what we want to hear, because they've done their research and because they understand, the company that they're interviewing with. And when we as a company, when we don't feel like one of 100, right? Like that just makes you stand out, right? You want to really curate and cater your approach for the company that you're applying to. And, it does take time, but unfortunately that's just the market we're in right now. And, if you're not going to do it, there's 5 other designers that are definitely going to do it.
Right. I think it also gives you a nice signal of like, oh, this person's taking this seriously. They're thoughtful, they're curious, they have rigor around their research process, and they're showing that and how they're showing up with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that.
Love it too. I wanted to put a question up from Jade. This is also in terms of like just the initial selection process. And Jade says, how much does years of experience factor into whether or not you decide to talk to a candidate? For example, if the role is asking for 3+ years and someone has a great portfolio with 2 to 3 years, is this an automatic no?
No. No. It's, what you've done with the experience that you have is more important than like the numerical value, right? Like I want to understand the qualitative value of your experience versus how many years you have. I don't know if, there are other recruiters that are different in this. But for me, I don't know. I can't remember the last time I did like the years calculations to try to match them up. You just got to have the good work. It's really all about the work.
Yeah.
It'll speak for itself. Yeah.
And I think also, I'm just going to say this too. I think that a lot of women tend to feel like they're underqualified for roles, but I think that stops them from applying in the first place, where they're like, oh, I don't have exactly what they're looking for. But I think, I think to be competitive in the market and to give yourself a chance, it's like, just try it, right? Like you already have the no. If you don't apply, you already have the no. So why not?
Exactly. And, I do think for any women that are here with us today or that watch this later, women do tend to kind of look at a list of requirements. And if they don't meet 3 of them, they just move on. And I've seen so many men, and this isn't like a man bashing situation, but I mean, I've seen, so many men that will clearly be underqualified and still apply for these roles. And, again, I just want to make it clear, like those requirements are there as like guardrails, right? They're just there to set like a basic list of, okay, this is kind of what we're looking for. But especially in creative roles and creative functions and design, I'm a broken record. It's about the work. If you have good work, but you only have 2 years of it, and this role is like asking for like 5 years, I will look at your portfolio, because if we can see that potential, then that could be something we're interested in.
Right. And I also think like 2 years at like a startup, for instance, like you're wearing so many hats, you're doing so many things. If you're shipping and launching constantly and you've got tons of great impact stories, that can be 5 years someplace else. That maybe it's just, a bigger company, or you're wearing just like a tiny little hat within a bigger team. Right?
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think we talked about this the other day too, but in terms of, inbound applications through like the ATS, it is true or false that every portfolio is viewed by a human or a robot.
True. There is, here's the thing. There's a lot of talk about AI, viewing portfolios, this, that. Listen, there is no way that any AI agent is going to understand how to look at a portfolio. I don't even know when that will, or if that will ever happen. It's definitely not now. Humans are looking at your portfolios. There are companies that, do use applicant tracking systems. Like, for example, Ashby does have its own AI tools embedded within that help maybe organize your inbound funnel, right? Like they help you understand what that pipeline looks like. They can put people in categories, but it can't technically just like auto decline you. So, if you apply to a job in the morning and then that evening, like you get rejected, it just means they viewed your portfolio. Like it doesn't mean that you're in, some automatic situation where the tool was declining you. It's all humans looking at your work.
It's also probably why so many people don't hear back for a long time, right? If there's such a volume, obviously people will post on LinkedIn and then 12 hours later they have to take the role down because of the applications.
Yeah.
Is there a way around that, Janine? Like if people reach out to you on LinkedIn where they're like, hey, I don't want to put my resume into a black hole on LinkedIn through this auto apply. What's your feeling on people reaching out to you directly or kind of going around that process?
Put it in the black hole first and then reach out. Just go ahead and apply, get it in there. Listen, like if you're, within the first 200 or so, like chances are you'll get eyes on your portfolio. If you apply and there's already 1,000 people ahead of you, we might find amazing candidates within that first bucket, and then we move forward, right? And then it's like, if there's another round later, then we might kind of get there. But we tend to kind of search in that way through our inbound pipelines. But I always say reach out. Try to do some research, find the hiring manager if you can. I always think that reaching out to a hiring manager could actually sometimes be even better than reaching out to the recruiters. And that's something to think about. But I always welcome the reach outs, but my favorite thing is when they say I've applied and I just wanted to reach out and express my interest, right? Because then I'm like, okay, if this is a good conversation and I'm interested, and maybe they're applicant 500, I can go in and I can just search for them in the system. But just get it in the system, because otherwise with this market, you could get buried.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of go through the correct protocols, like have your resume or portfolio in the right place. Yep. And then follow up maybe with something personal about whoever they're reaching out to. If it's you or the hiring manager, like, hey, I looked at your LinkedIn and I see that, you went to blah, blah, blah school. My cousin went there or whatever, but just like make it a little more personal, sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. And I also just think, if you're going to reach out to a recruiter, just realize that like they're getting hundreds of messages like every day. And that's one of the reasons why I recommend trying to network with the actual teams that are at this company. Follow these people on LinkedIn, on Instagram, wherever, interact with their content. Don't just go straight to the messages and be like, hi, I applied. I want to talk to you about this. Like, get to know them, become part of like their community and their networks, join. There are so many different, like Slack groups out there. You can kind of just, Google or ask ChatGPT to help you find them or talk to your friends. But I just think community building is so huge in breaking through that noise, that the more people you can meet that are also designers, like it's going to be that much easier for you to then get through the door at one of those companies.
Totally. That's what the comment section is for, the community, connect with each other.
I feel like we missed a few questions. I thought I saw some pop up.
Yeah. If we've got a minute.
Part 2, we'll have to do a part 2 later.
Part 2. Bring it on back.
Yeah.
Ton of community events happening in New York all the time for the design community in particular, but I know there's stuff in every city. So if you know of some great events, definitely share them to other designers in your city. I find that a lot of designers I speak to, not all, but a lot are craving a bit of in-person meetup action, getting together in a room, whether it's casual or, someone presenting some work or something like that. There's definitely a lot more of it going on again. It's getting popular. It's an amazing way to meet just super like-minded people, finding your tribe.
And I'll just throw out there's a group, Creative Mornings, and they have They have meetups all the time. They have multiple, cities all across the country here. I don't know if they're international. I think they're just US based, but even just dropping in to creative mornings, you never know who you're going to meet at these functions.
Yep.
I used to go to those all
Timothy
the time.
Goodman at one recently. Yeah. That was a lot of fun.
Great. Nice.
Yep.
Well, it looks like we're at time. That went by so fast. Oh my gosh, what great information you shared with all of us, Janine. Thank you so much. It was so awesome to have you on.
It was
any
great.
little thoughts you want to kind of leave us with before we all ring off?
I just, for everybody, first of all, that's out there searching, like this is an insane market, and don't think that we don't know it and we don't recognize it. And, I feel for everybody, and, I'm just really hoping that, you all find amazing jobs at great companies. So just, we see you, we know that the work you're putting in, and, just keep on doing the work. And just to leave it with even a further thought, it's all about the work, right? Focus on the work. Treat your job hunt the same way you would treat, your design work, right? Be strategic, be thoughtful, be intentional, understand, your end user, which would be, the company you're trying to work for, right? Like use some of that in your actual job hunt.
Amen. Amen. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you everybody for joining us today and your great questions. We had such an active kind of chat going on today. So thanks to everyone for coming and for watching.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Yeah.
Our pleasure. All right.
Definitely do a 2.0.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.